Imagine, for a moment, that you have done absolutely everything right.
Right, like the perfect financial student.
Exactly. You've worked hard your entire adult life. You never dramatically overspent.
Yeah.
You lived within your means. And every single month, like clockwork, you funneled a portion of your paycheck into your 401k or your IRA.
Just doing exactly what you were told.
Right. You were the quintessential disciplined saver. You did exactly what the financial industry, the government, and probably your own parents told you to do.
And it takes a lot of sacrifice to actually do that.
It really does. So now you're standing at the finish line looking at a nest egg of, say, $1 to $3 million. You are ready to just, relax.
Yeah, you feel like you've won the game.
But what if that exact behavior, that lifetime of financial discipline, has unknowingly walked you right into the crosshairs of a massive, hidden financial trap?
It creates an incredibly frustrating scenario, honestly. I mean, the very people who follow the rules the most strictly, the people who deferred their gratification for decades, are the ones positioned to be punished the most severely in retirement.
And that is exactly the paradox we're unpacking today on this deep dive.
It's a huge issue.
It really is. I was recently looking through some presentation slides put together by Siri Inui. She's a licensed financial professional and a registered Social Security analyst.
Oh, yeah, her work is fascinating.
It is. And her presentation actually references some really eye-opening data from a Kiplinger article by Ray R. Harris.
Right.
So our mission for this deep dive is to decode this concept they call the tax torpedo.
Which is such a great name for it, honestly.
It really paints a picture. It's this hidden danger lurking in the retirement tax code. And it's largely invisible to the average person, but it's actively penalizing middle-class savers.
Yeah, and penalizing them heavily.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because, most financial planners look at today's landscape and say we're in a historically low-tax environment.
Sure, they see a 22% bracket and think, well, that's fine.
Right, feels entirely manageable for a retiree who maybe spent their working years in the 30% brackets. But Inu's presentation suggests this low-tax environment is it's just a lullaby.
It really is. It lulls you into a false sense of security.
Exactly. It's masking this future collision between your retirement accounts and your Social Security checks.
And to understand how those two things collide, we have to kind of look past current tax brackets and step back in time.
Yeah, Dave, take us back.
Well, the core issue driving this torpedo isn't some new aggressive piece of legislation. It's actually a very old piece of legislation that lawmakers have essentially just abandoned.
Interesting.
Yeah, we need to look at the tax code established back in 1983, specifically something called provisional income thresholds.
Provisional income. Okay, I want to break that down because it sounds like typical IRS jargon.
Oh, it completely is IRS jargon.
Right. But understanding the actual math behind it is like the only way this torpedo makes any sense.
Definitely. So provisional income isn't just the salary or the distributions you pull down.
Yeah, the IRS calculates it by taking your adjusted gross income, your AGI, adding in any non-taxable interest you might have, like from municipal bonds, and then they add in exactly half of your Social Security benefits.
And that formula right there is the trapdoor.
Wow, really?
Yeah, the government created that specific equation in 1983 to determine if a retiree makes too much money. If your provisional income crosses a certain threshold, the government begins taxing a portion of your Social Security benefits.
And those threshold numbers, which were set over 40 years ago, are shockingly low by today's standards.
Oh, they are.
For a single person filing taxes, the threshold is $25,000. And for a married couple filing jointly, the threshold is $32,000.
Right. And what's fascinating here is, well, if you think about 1983, $32,000 for a couple was a fairly significant retirement income back then.
Oh, sure. It was a lot of money.
It was designed to only catch the absolute wealthiest retirees. It was effectively a tax on the rich. But the crucial detail, the actual engine of the tax torpedo, is that those figures, the $25,000 and $32,000, have never been adjusted for inflation.
Wait, really? Never?
Not once in over 40 years.
Wow. So it's like driving on a modern, multi-lane superhighway where the speed limit is permanently stuck at a 1983 school zone pace.
That's a perfect way to put it.
You're practically guaranteed to get a ticket just by existing. I mean, think about what $32,000 bought you in 1983 versus what it buys you today.
Exactly. It's apples and oranges.
Anyone retiring today with even a modest standard of living, just paying for basic utilities, groceries, and, property taxes, is going to blow right past that $72,000 threshold without even trying.
Because of decades of inflation, the purchasing power of that threshold has completely eroded. Every day, middle-class retirees are now casually crossing a line that was originally meant for the elite,
Right.
and crossing that line triggers the mathematical mechanism that causes the tax torpedo.
Okay, let's translate that 1983 rule into actual real-world pain for you, the listener. Because the presentation outlines a scenario that shows just how brutal the math gets.
The math is where it gets scary.
It really is. So let's say you're retired, your provisional income is already over that unupdated threshold, and you need to pull some extra money out of your traditional IRA.
Okay, a pretty common scenario.
Yeah, maybe the water heater broke, or you want to take your family on a vacation, so you withdraw exactly $1,000.
Right. And in a standard logical tax system, you would look at that action and assume a straightforward consequence.
Right, you added $1,000 to your income, so you pay your standard marginal tax rate on that $1,000.
That's what most people think happens.
Yeah, if you're sitting in the 22% tax bracket, you'd expect to owe $220 on that $1,000 withdrawal. It's just basic arithmetic.
Right, but the IRS provisional income formula does not use basic arithmetic.
Of course not.
Because you are already over that 1983 threshold, that $1,000 withdrawal doesn't just sit on your ledger in isolation.
Okay, so what does it do?
Well, the formula dictates that as your income rises through this phase-in zone, an increasing percentage of your Social Security becomes taxable, up to a maximum of 85%.
Oh, wow. So when I pull out that $1,000 from my IRA, my adjusted gross income goes up by $1,000.
Correct.
That pushes my overall provisional income higher. And because of where I am in the formula's phase-in range, that single action acts like a magnet.
Exactly.
It actually pulls an extra $850 of my Social Security benefits into the taxable bucket.
That's the trap. The IRS suddenly sees your taxable income increase not by the $1,000 you actually put in your pocket, but by $1,850.
That is wild.
Yeah, the $1,000 withdrawal plus the $850 of Social Security that just lost its tax-free status.
And here's where it gets really interesting and where the math kind of just speaks for itself. If the IRS is taxing you on $850 and you are supposedly safe in that 22% tax bracket, you have to run that calculation.
And people rarely run the calculation.
Right. But if you do, 22% of $850 is not $220. It is $407.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You took $1,000 out of your own account and you generated a $407 tax bill on that specific action.
I want you to just sit with that reality for a second. Like, really think about it.
It's a tough pill to swallow.
How would you feel if you went to a bank branch, withdrew $1,000 of your life savings to fix a broken water heater, and the government immediately reached across the counter and took $407 out?
But people would be outraged.
Right. That means your effective marginal tax rate on that money just spiked to 40.7%.
It is a massive surtax that happens entirely behind the scenes. Like the 22% bracket you see on paper is the lullaby.
Right.
The 40.7% reality you pay when you actually access your money, that is the torpedo.
But you know, that raises a rather glaring question, though.
What's that?
If we are talking about a secret 40.7% tax bracket, why isn't this front page news every single day?
That's a great question.
Usually when there's a tax trap this severe, the ultra-wealthy are the first ones hiring lobbyists to rewrite the code. Why aren't the billionaires complaining about the provisional income formula?
Well, they aren't complaining because the trap wasn't built for them. And ironically, it doesn't really affect them at all.
Really? How so?
The source material is very clear about who is in the blast radius here. People with $10 or $20 million in the bank blow past those provisional income thresholds on January 2nd.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, they are already paying taxes on the maximum 85% of their Social Security benefits by default.
Plus, a billionaire doesn't really rely on Social Security check to fund their lifestyle anyway.
Exactly. The tax torpedo has a ceiling, and the ultra-wealthy are already sitting comfortably above it.
So if the billionaires are immune, who is actually taking the hit?
The primary targets are the exact demographic we described at the start of this deep dive.
Disciplined savers.
Right. Engineers, teachers, mid-level managers, small business owners. The demographic of people who maxed out their 401ks for 30 years and accumulated roughly $1 million to $3 million in tax-deferred accounts.
So sad because success is basically being penalized.
It really is.
These are fundamentally middle-class people. They aren't flying on private jets or buying yachts.
No, not at all.
They just diligently put away a piece of every paycheck, trusted the system, and built a solid nest egg. And now the sources are telling us that these disciplined savers are among the most tax-burdened demographics in retirement.
And it shatters the foundational assumption of traditional retirement advice. I mean, for decades, the mantra has been defer, defer, defer.
Right. Put it all in the 401k.
Exactly. Put off paying taxes during your working years because your income, and therefore your tax bracket, will naturally be lower in retirement.
But the provisional income formula turns that assumption completely upside down. If you have a $2 million IRA, your taxes in retirement might actually be drastically higher because every dollar you pull out triggers that 40.7% compound effect on your Social Security.
The conventional wisdom simply did not anticipate the long-term effects of a 1983 tax code operating in a modern economy.
Okay, so let's put ourselves in the shoes of a listener who fits this demographic. You're 65 years old, you've got $2 million in a traditional IRA, and you were staring down the barrel of this 40.7% torpedo.
It's a scary place to be.
The natural human instinct is going to be avoidance. You might think, I just won't touch the IRA. I'll live off my pension or my cash savings, and I will leave the tax-deferred accounts completely alone until I absolutely have to.
Yeah, it feels like the safest move emotionally. Just keep your head down and don't touch it.
Right.
But strategically, Syria News presentation warns that deferring withdrawals is a critical error.
Really? Why is that?
By waiting, you are handing total control of your tax destiny directly over to the IRS at age 73.
Oh, because of RMDs. Age 73 is when required minimum distributions kick in.
Exactly.
Up until that birthday, you get to choose whether or not you pull money out of your IRA. But at 73, the government steps in and dictates a mandatory withdrawal schedule.
They do. They force you to take money out, regardless of whether you need it to buy groceries or not.
So leaving your IRA alone is like feeding a monster in a cage, knowing eventually it's going to break out.
That's exactly it. Instead of the old analogy of feeding a monster, think of your tax-deferred accounts like building up water behind a dam without a spillway.
Okay, I like that visual.
You're in your 60s letting the portfolio grow. So your $2.2 million portfolio might compound to over $3 million by the time you reach 73.
And while portfolio growth sounds like the ultimate goal, in the context of the tax torpedo, a bigger reservoir just means a more catastrophic flood.
Precisely.
Because the RMD is calculated as a percentage of your total account value. A larger portfolio at age 73 mandates much larger forced withdrawals.
Right. And those massive forced withdrawals guarantee that your adjusted gross income will be pushed incredibly high.
Which triggers the torpedo.
Exactly. That artificially inflates your provisional income, guaranteeing that the maximum amount of your Social Security is taxed.
Wow.
By waiting, you actively compound your future tax liability. You lock yourself into that 40.7% zone every single year for the remainder of your life with absolutely no legal way to turn the tap off.
That's incredibly stressful.
Oh.
But if building up the RMD dam just creates a massive tax flood at age 73,
Yeah.
it has to be a pressure release valve, right?
Yes, thankfully there is.
The presentation pivots from the problem to a very specific solution. Inui's slides highlight a concept called the golden window.
Yeah, the golden window. It represents the critical time frame between the day you retire, when your regular W-2 wages stop, and the day you turn 73, when the government forces those RMDs.
And during those gap years, which might be 5, 8, or even 10 years depending on when you retire, your income is typically at its absolute lowest.
Right, because you aren't earning a salary anymore.
More importantly, you are in the driver's seat. You still have total control over your tax bracket because the IRS isn't forcing you to take distributions yet.
Exactly. You have the autonomy to dictate exactly how much income you recognize each year.
Okay, so what's the actual move here?
The strategy during this window is highly proactive. You systematically convert funds from your torpedo-prone traditional IRA into a torpedo-proof Roth IRA.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate here, because the idea of a Roth conversion trips a lot of people up.
It does, yeah, but it feels counterintuitive at first.
It really does. Because if I have $100,000 in my traditional IRA and I convert it to a Roth during this golden window, I have to volunteer to pay the taxes on it today.
Correct. You pay the tax up front.
So if I'm in the 22% bracket, I'm cutting a check for $22,000 to the IRS. Haven't I just crippled my compound interest? I mean, I only have $78,000 left working for me.
That is the classic hesitation. I hear it all the time. But you have to look at the after-tax outcome of the entire system, not just the isolated balance of one single account. By volunteering to pay the 22% tax today, you permanently shield that money from the 40.7% marginal trap later. You're accepting a known manageable cost to eliminate a devastating recurring penalty.
That makes a lot of sense. And I guess it also acts as that pressure release valve for the dam we talked about.
Exactly.
Every dollar you move out of the traditional IRA and into the Roth makes the traditional account smaller.
Right.
So when you finally do reach age 73, the mandatory withdrawals the IRS forces on you will be calculated on a much smaller balance.
You're deflating the balloon before they force it to pop.
I love that. And
Yeah.
there's another benefit too, right?
Yeah, beyond managing RMDs, the third benefit of the Roth conversion is arguably the most powerful when it comes to Social Security.
Okay, hit me.
The Roth IRA is fundamentally invisible to the IRS provisional income formula.
Wow. Invisible.
Completely. This goes back to the math we broke down earlier. Provisional income looks at your AGI, non-taxable interest, and half of your Social Security. Withdrawals from a Roth IRA simply do not count toward your adjusted gross income. They are completely excluded from the equation.
That is huge.
Yeah.
So you can pull $50,000 or even $100,000 out of a Roth IRA to fund your lifestyle, and it will not add a single dollar to your provisional income.
Not a single dollar.
It won't trigger a dime of additional taxes on your Social Security benefits. You're legally moving your assets into a jurisdiction that the 1983 formula basically cannot recognize.
Yeah, it's the ultimate defense against the torpedo.
And the sources mention a really interesting geographic detail that amplifies this strategy too.
Oh, right, the state tax aspect.
Yeah, the presentation points out that in states with no state income tax, and Florida is the example they use, these proactive Roth conversions become even more potent.
Because when you convert in a state like Florida, you're only navigating the federal tax brackets.
Right.
You execute the conversion, pay the federal 22%, and then you effectively lock in that wealth tax-free for the rest of your life.
That is incredibly powerful.
If you live in a high-tax state, the math requires a bit more nuance, but the underlying principle of avoiding the torpedo remains exactly the same.
So we've gone from the mechanics of a hidden 40% tax to the specific tactics of a Roth conversion. But so what does this all mean? How does this fit into the broader picture of managing a life savings?
Well, it can't just be about moving numbers between different types of accounts, right?
Exactly. It has to be bigger than that.
It requires a fundamental shift in perspective regarding what retirement actually is. And Siri Inui introduces a core philosophy in her slides called the new art of living.
The new art of living. I like the sound of that.
Yeah, it shifts the focus away from purely accumulating wealth, which is the goal for the first 40 years of your career, and moves towards strategic distribution.
Okay.
The framework relies on 10%, 3 rules, and 3 interconnected goals. Those 3 goals are income protection, income replacement, and generational wealth.
Let's look at that first one. If you're losing 40% of your distributions to a phantom tax, income protection suddenly becomes significantly more vital than trying to squeeze an extra 2% of return out of the stock market.
Absolutely. It's recognizing that the gross number on your account statement is kind of an illusion. The only number that actually matters is what you get to spend.
Right. And that flows directly into the second goal, income replacement.
Exactly. The goal is to ensure your retirement isn't just a pile of money you're slowly draining, but a sustainable, tax-efficient flow.
Makes sense.
By converting to a Roth, you replace taxable, highly volatile income with tax-free, predictable income. You basically stabilize the ship.
And the final piece is generational wealth. Passing on more of your life's work to your family or your chosen charities by legally keeping less of it in the government's hands.
Because the tax torpedo doesn't just impact your standard of living, it actively shrinks the legacy you leave behind.
That's a sobering thought.
To achieve those 3 goals, the presentation really stresses that focusing on return on investment, or ROI, is totally inadequate for the distribution phase.
Right, because ROI doesn't account for taxes.
Exactly. You can build the most robust stock portfolio in the market, but without a strategy to protect those returns from the tax code, you are leaving massive amounts of capital on the table.
So what's the alternative?
It necessitates working with a multidisciplinary team. So that includes tax specialists and estate attorneys to ensure your strategy is aligned and resilient.
Because we spend our entire working lives obsessed with the accumulation game. We want the highest return, the biggest balance. But the distribution phase is an entirely different game, played by entirely different rules.
It really is.
As we wrap up today's deep dive, the main takeaway for you, the listener, is pretty clear. Saving diligently and putting the money away every month was only half the battle.
Yeah, the first half.
Defending those savings from outdated legislative traps, like the unadjusted 1983 provisional income thresholds, is the other half.
For sure point.
The tax torpedo proves that without a proactive strategy, doing everything right during your working years, can still result in punishing disproportionate lifetime tax bills.
Nobody wants that.
Nobody. You have to understand the math, and you have to take advantage of the golden window before the IRS takes the wheel at age 73.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it forces us to take a hard look at the assumptions we build our financial lives on.
Definitely.
We're seeing firsthand how a static piece of tax code from 1983 is currently devastating the retirement plans of today's middle-class savers simply because it was never updated for inflation.
It's crazy.
It begs a much larger question for all of us. What present-day tax laws or financial assumptions are we treating as permanent right now, today, that will inevitably become the hidden financial torpedoes of the 2060s?
Oh, wow.
Right. Are the standard rules of safe saving fundamentally broken if the government never updates the math?
That is the exact kind of question that separates a passive saver from a strategic one. If the 1983 speed limit is still being enforced today, what rules from today will we be trapped by in 40 years?
Something to really think about.
It brings us full circle. Being a disciplined saver is an incredible achievement, but without a clear-eyed strategy to navigate the evolving mathematics of the tax code, you might just be building a bigger target for the torpedo. Keep your eyes open, challenge the conventional wisdom, and don't let a low-tax lullaby put you to sleep.